Hi guys, so I want to take this opportunity to do a video on this particular topic. So no building work on this one. A lot of people have been asking questions like this. They want to build an outbuilding, particularly, or summer house or an office, garden office, and they want to know, do they need to get planning permission? Do you need to contact an architect and get planning permission? Do you need to get buildings regulation approval? Obviously, these things do cost, and it's good to know whether certain things are necessary or not. So we're going to look at two things. One will be building regulations and one will be planning permission. So what's the difference between planning permission and buildings regulations? The main difference is with planning permission, you're actually seeking permission from the planning department to build what it is that you want to build or develop. With building regulations, on the other hand, you're not seeking the permission to do the work, but what you're doing is you are seeking to have the work checked and approved for compliance with the local standards of construction. So that's the main difference. So that's why some cases you can require one without the other. So for instance, you might build an outhouse and you may need permission to build that house because, let's say, you want to build the roof higher than what's permissible under permitted development. However, the footprint of the house may be small enough that you won't need buildings regulations to build it. So I'm going to give you guys some general information. There will be specific situations, particularly if you live in like a conservation area and so on. So you will need to, double check certain criteria. So there are a few key limits and conditions that are necessary to be considered to know whether you need planning permission or whether you can build under the permitted development laws. So some of these are not being able to build on the front elevation of the house, or what we would call your front of your house, like your driveway. Typically, outbuildings under permitted development will be pretty much limited to the rear of the house, i.e. the rear garden. They must be single story, so no double story garden houses allowed, and the maximum eave heights should be 2.5 meters from the ground. So in the case of a flat roof, the outbuilding's roof should not be any higher than 2.5 meters from the ground to the eaves of the roof. And eaves is typically means the lower end of a flat roof. So if you've got a flat roof slope where your guttering is, if you measure, say, from the top of that roof just above the gutter to the ground, that will give you your that's the height where you've measured. I've looked into this. Some people believe it's underneath the flat roof to the ground, but from my understanding and research on this, it's actually from the top edge of the roof. Now, in the case of a pitch roof, if you are allowed to build one under permitted development, the maximum overall height of the pitch roof is 4 meters, and any other type of roof is 3 meters. Now, although you can build up to 4 meters and 3 meters in some cases, the 2.5 meters will be the most common type that you'll be allowed, especially in areas if you've got a smaller garden and if you have to build very close to your boundaries. So as long as your building is within 2 meters of a boundary, you will be stuck at the 2.5 meter maximum. So if you've got a huge garden where you can build like in the middle of the garden and you've got more than 2 meters away from the house all around as far as the boundary is concerned, then those other heights will be able to be applicable to you. You also won't be allowed to have any balconies under permitted development. One of the other key elements, especially is relevant to houses in in London that I've found, because a lot of London houses have fairly small gardens, and some people are limited to the size of the outhouse that they're allowed to build because of the size of the garden. So typically you are not allowed to build or develop on more than half of the land around your quote unquote original house. So this is excluding extensions and so on. So you have to take in consideration, if you have more sheds and so on in your garden, they will all be added up as the total size, and you're not allowed to develop more than half of your original garden space. So those are some of the key elements when it comes to planning permission. And I think in most cases, most people that do build garden houses, summer houses and sheds and so on, they are able to build within these requirements. Once you go to a larger sizes and you want higher roofs and so on, that's where you then tend to need to apply for planning permission to build those buildings. Let's talk about building regulations. So building regulations, these are some of the key factors that you need to consider to know whether or not you will need buildings regulation approval for the project. And this typically means you will need to submit this is a separate process that goes to a separate department, and they will have to inspect certain aspects of the work to make sure that they fall within, or they follow certain legal regulations on the project. You will generally have to instruct either your local council, which you will have to pay a fee for, and they will become your building inspector for that particular project, or you can go through private companies who can deal with the council for you on your behalf, and they will essentially take on the responsibility from the local authority of doing all the inspections, and they have the authority to sign off the project at the end once everything's okay, and they will liaise with the relevant authorities to make sure all the paperwork is recorded for the property. A couple of the key factors when it comes to size, because this is what people ask a lot: what size can I build? So the floor area is what is the most important aspect here. Now the floor area differs from the what we would call the footprint of the building. Footprint of the building would be, let's say you call it a 5x4 house. That would be where the external walls would measure, so 5 meters one direction to 4 meters the other direction. Your floor area deals with the internal space, so obviously your floor area will be smaller than your outside footprint, because you'll be minusing the width of the walls, the insulation, etc, etc. If you are building without building regulations approval, the property will not be allowed as a sleeping accommodation. So it's not allowed for any sort of dwelling. It could be used for a garage typically, for shed, for an office. It's an extension, essentially an extension of the existing house, and also must be used as part of the house. So i.e. it can't be a separate dwelling. I see them all over London. We all see them all over London, where people build these huge ones in the back of the garden and they rent them out. They're all over the place, but they are not allowed to be done without buildings regulation and obviously planning permission. So the maximum floor area that you are allowed to build is 15 square meters in most cases. However, there are cases where you're allowed to build larger than that, and you can build up to 30 square meters of internal space without needing buildings regulation. However, the following must apply. It must not be used for sleeping accommodation, and it is also required to be at least 1 meter from a boundary, or it can be constructed substantially of non-combustible materials. So if you are building a garden house and you're building it out of timber, for instance, a timber summer house or so on, you are pretty much regulated down to 15 square meters in most cases. Unless you're going to move it at least a meter away from a boundary, then you can build up to 30 square meters. And the main reason for that is because if it's made out of timber, it's highly combustible, and the idea is to protect your neighbors and for spread of fire, that you maintain a safe distance away from the neighbor. Now, in the case of building a block house, like say what we generally build, where it's majority of the construction is built out of non-combustible materials, you are allowed to build within a meter of the boundaries. So some people do ask and say, oh, does it need to be a meter away, or is it too close, or am I allowed to build right up to the boundary? Yes, you are allowed to build right to the boundary, but in most cases you wouldn't be able to do that with a timber framed house if it's more than 15 square meters. So up to a 3x5 would be fine. If you went 5x4, 20 square meters, you would be over the requirement and you would need building regulations approval for that. So guys, basically, yeah, just wanted to share a bit of information. I hope it's been helpful and hope you guys have learned something. Obviously, if you've got any questions, leave a comment and I will do my best to try and help you answer it, or at least direct you to some more information. And if you've gained something from the video, if you like the video, please give us a like, and also you can share it with your friends. And guys, we'll see you on the next one, so take care.